I think it's time we blow this scene.
Well, we just sat down to record.
Get everybody and the stuff together.
But all this equipment is set up.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Welcome to Eat a Fix, a podcast about a couple hyperfixating on obscure pop culture. I'm your co-host, Paul Unger.
And I'm your co-host, Jess Unger.
And today we get to talk about something that we love but don't get to talk about nearly enough in public conversations. And that is anime.
Anime.
And specifically, we're going to be talking about Cowboy Bebop. Now, initially, the first episode was supposed to be just about the anime, and then this was supposed to come out on the 19th, with the Netflix adaptation coming out on the same day. That did not happen, and since recording, we've been able to actually watch the Netflix adaptation, so we'll be talking about both of those.
Super excited.
But first, everyone has their first anime that they watch, and that resonates with them, and then another series that kind of captures their heart. What was your first anime, Jess?
My very first anime, if I think back to my Wii youth days, I would say it was Astro Boy.
Really?
Yeah. It was on TV a lot. That's the first one I can ever really remember, just because I don't think Maya the Bee counts.
No, I don't think so.
No, it's kind of the same studios-esque, but it's not, I wouldn't call it anime. So, first one I would say is Astro Boy. And unfortunately, it doesn't hold up as an adult.
No, we've tried rewatching that a little while ago. We have the collection, and then we found it again on Funimation.
Yeah, and it wasn't very good. It's very saccharine. It is definitely geared towards younger audiences, which is why I think our daughter really liked it. But in terms of being an adult and going back and watching it, it absolutely does not hold up.
See, and strangely enough, my first time with Astro Boy was the CGI movie that came out with Nick Cage as Astro Boy's father.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that, but now I realize, having watched that and finally gone through and watched Alita Battle Angel, I'm like, oh, they kind of just stole that plot and made a lesser movie, but with Nick Cage, which is on brand.
Interesting. Okay. What was your first anime?
I'd have to say the Hello Kitty anime. Like the Hello Kitty show that was on with all of her friends. So she had the frog and the raven or crow and all those creatures. That was something that was on when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was an anime because I didn't have any way of distinguishing that from Western kids shows.
That makes sense. And Sanrio has its own style of things. It's not your traditional big eyes anime. It's like their mouths don't move. They have beady little dot eyes.
Which I honestly think works out really well because it's so easy to dub that
afterwards. It is.
And I didn't realize until our daughter got into Hello Kitty of how many different movies there are and how long these animations have been going on for. But that was my first one. I think eventually moved on to Sailor Moon, Pokemon, and then it went to hell from there. Now, what was the one that resonated with you the most?
Easily, Fruits Basket. I found it when a friend introduced me to it back when I had a brief, incomplete stint in university, and I fell in love with it. I ended up buying a copy of the first season way back in the early 2000s. And when the remake came out, I was floored. All the emotions on the planet. I introduced you to it.
Oh, yeah.
You felt said same. All of the emotions on the planet. It was lovely.
That was a really good show.
And it's a comfort one for me. If I'm feeling like garbage and I just need, a feel-good, warm fuzzy, I will watch that or I will go to Ouran Host Club.
Both solid picks, and both shows that you have introduced me to that I love so much.
It's dingy. It's not, you don't have to think. It's not head scratchers. It's just, they're cute. They're fun.
Well, Fruits Basket does get into some pretty big emotions and some tough subject matter.
Oh, in the remake, you bet.
Oh,
But
yeah.
in the initial one that was released,
That one keeps it pretty light until like the last 2 episodes. And then it's just like, we're just going to hit you with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, pretty much. But those are mine.
Mm-hmm.
What are yours? Or what is yours?
Mine is Trigun. So back in the day, before high-speed internet and streaming services, you had to rely on one friend that had slightly better internet than you and questionable morals to download all of said anime that didn't make its way onto TV. Like, we had YTV that had anime, and they would play that at night, and you had your Gundam Wing, and you had Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
And a lot of those shows just looped over and over again. So they didn't ever pick up new stuff until years later. But this one friend downloaded all these episodes of Trigun, I think on a whim, of just like he heard it was good on a forum and just downloaded them all. And next thing I know, we are full-blown Trigun fans, everything Trigun, which is difficult because we were watching the show in like 2003, 2004, and the show wrapped up in the late 90s. So finding Trigun merch stateside was impossible. Everything I got when I was in high school was bootlegged upon bootlegged.
Oh, man.
But man, that show, that soundtrack, it's so good. And I actually just went back and revisited the show.
I know.
We were talking about Cowboy Bebop, and I'm like, well, if I'm going through Cowboy Bebop, I gotta go through Trigun. And then finish Cowboy Bebop, and then probably go back to Trigun. So that one, I think that's always going to have a soft spot in my heart. I am so happy for the little Vash statue that I managed to find that has the little black cat with it.
I don't blame you for that. I remember when we started dating and you pulled that out of your stash of stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I co-own this now, right?
Oh, that's the one thing that I still have difficulty with is we finally have our own place.
Yes.
And we're grown adults. We can put up wherever we want. And we have gaming stuff and other like movie posters all over the place. But the anime stuff is still relegated to the basement.
It's true.
Because we have the Bleach stuff. We have some Full Metal Alchemist stuff. We have the Trigun statue. And all that stuff is up hidden down here. And I'm like, I eventually will get to a point where I'm okay with it. Probably by the time I hit 40. But yeah, I feel like it's still difficult to have that stuff out and be recognized as an adult.
Which is ridiculous because we have the courage to, and actually you gave me the courage to do so, to put up a watercolor of a whole uterus on our wall upstairs where parents and everyone are going to see it. And yet we can't muster the courage to put up our anime statuettes.
In fairness, that is a pretty dope print.
No, it is. Definitely. It's just weird how brains work.
To segue from that, the friend that introduced me to Trigun, my anime dealer,
so wrong.
The shonen pusher, he is also the one who got me hooked on Cowboy Bebop, because after watching Trigun so many times, he started mixing it up. So we got the different Gundam series that hadn't made it to airways. And then eventually he just dropped Cowboy Bebop on us with absolutely no warning. Like, you need to have some prep because you're used to, like, the J-Rock ballads going into an opener, and no one was prepared for how hard
Tank was going to smack you upside the head.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in fairness, we binged the entirety of the live-action Cowboy Bebop in a single day, never skipped the intro once, and it never got old. Ever.
Like that entire soundtrack bops. But let's talk about Cowboy Bebop.
Yes.
So, initially, Sunrise was approached by Bandai to make a show set in space to sell spaceship toys.
Yes.
So, the director of the series, and I'm going to butcher his name, so Jess will say it for me,
Shinichirō Watanabe,
got together with basically the tops of their fields of musicians, with Yoko Kanno, a technical animator, as well as their other, I guess, fight scene animator, choreographer at Sunrise, and just started making Cowboy Bebop and coming up with this whole premise. And it was so out of left field that when Bandai came back to see what they had for this show to sell toys, they were just mortified by what this team had created. It was a baller show, but was nowhere near what they wanted. So of course they had to pull out, and then Sunrise realized they had full creative control to do whatever they wanted with it.
Well, to clarify a little bit here, what Bandai was looking for was a kids show.
Oh yeah.
Something to sell children these spaceship toys. And Cowboy Bebop is absolutely not for kids.
Actually, Cowboy Bebop had quite a few of its episodes censored during its release.
Which makes sense.
So that was in Japan. And then they had like a few episodes that they've had to put out to contextualize different things. And man, this show got censored to high heck when it came to North America.
I can imagine.
But the show itself has the Bebop, which is a
main carrier ship, I guess.
Yeah, it's a fishing vessel which has been transformed into a bounty hunting ship by the head of the group, Jet Black, who is a cop turned bounty hunter after being maimed on the job. You have Spike Spiegel, who is a martial arts fan who is a hitman turned bounty hunter. You have Faye Valentine, who comes in and out like a stray cat on the ship, who is a amnesiac who has turned to bounty hunting, which is apparently a very popular profession. You have the computer hacker, Ed, who is just very confusing. They are a weird rubber child.
Yes. I think rubber child is the best description for them. And we say them. Ed in the show self-proclaims as a girl.
Ed's not a little boy. Huh? Ed's a little girl.
What?
But I just don't think, I don't know, in this case it doesn't matter. But Ed is female.
Yeah.
And she has said so herself.
And honestly, the chaotic energy that Ed brings is kind of that inner voice sometimes of like those moments where you feel like the ADHD meds wearing off. Like just that, like, I'm just randomly going to sing a song about what's happening. Why? I don't know.
Because it seems like the thing to do right now. Also, my computer's name is Tomato.
It's very relatable. And then you have Ein, who is a dog, a Welsh Corgi, who is smarter than everyone else on the Bebop, and I think with opposable thumbs would rule the universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're like scientifically engineered. They're a data dog. So they're supposed to, my understanding from the episode was they were supposed to carry info, like a giant USB, but I think it might be a mistranslation or like something that got lost in it.
I'm not sure. I didn't really understand what made them a data dog. I just thought it was like, oh, we genetically engineered these dogs to be absolutely super smart, to like understand human speech and be able to hack computers, which, I mean, Ein can.
Yeah, Ein had a VR headset put on him in one episode and did stuff that even Ed was having difficulty with, and Ed was supposed to be a master hacker.
Yeah.
Which I was just like, see, Ein is smarter than everyone else here. Ein is more capable.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Ein had the dog limbs to match its body, it'd be unstoppable. Even like that. But I love corgis.
Yes.
So the show is episodic with some light threads kind of connecting the episodes and the characters. So all the characters have some arcs, but it's not like other animes. All these characters had their big intros 3 years before the show takes place. So Spike left his job as a hitman and became a bounty hunter. Jet was maimed on the job by the same organization that Spike left, and he became a bounty hunter. Mm-hmm. Faye woke up from cryogenic sleep after being wounded who knows how many years ago, and now is facing this mountain of debt, and Ed was doing whatever Ed was doing. But you don't see any of that. All that is told in flashbacks later on in the show. You just come into Spike and Jet going about their day.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff happening in the world that's just casually mentioned, but never actually shown. Like there's a large war that happened on the moon of Titan.
Yeah.
And a lot of the story arcs revolve around PTSD and experimentation that went on through there. Yep. You have other characters that have had strife and anguish over this period of time that you don't see. And I like that because you don't necessarily get that shonen show of here's the character starting off at their weakest state and like they're moving on up and they're always going to learn new lessons and eventually learn the power of friendship. You have a bunch of jaded adults who are dealing with their traumas. And I think the most frustrating part is, as an outside observer, you see all these people and go, if all of you could just be open for 5 minutes, you'd realize you have so much in common and could actually be friends. But instead, they're just like passive frenemies with each other.
Yep.
I think the biggest friendships are between Spike and Jet.
Because they've been partnered together for the longest.
Yeah.
So they are used to each other. And I think that's about the best that you can get in that, where it's not necessarily a friendship, because they don't really get involved unless they absolutely have to, unless you're Jet. Jet gets involved in everything, regardless of what he says. Because Jet cares, and he's a good guy. But yeah, of all of them, they all just kind of mind their own beeswax and sort of pitch in for the others if it either suits them or when they cave and actually feel guilty about their behavior.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's a little frustrating to watch sometimes of just like seeing all these people. And it's not like in those rom-coms where if they just talked about this very easily discussable thing, the whole climax of the movie would be moot. These are people who are going through a lot of difficult things.
Yeah.
But they all have that in common. And I think there's like some sort of camaraderie in that misery for each other.
Yeah. It's like nobody needs to bring up their trauma. They can just exist together because misery loves company. And that's exactly what they have.
Yeah. And the biggest plot throughout the show is Spike had left the gang called the Syndicate, which is basically the big crime organization. So any crime can usually be led back to the Syndicate. Mm-hmm. And one of the enforcers there, by the name of Vicious, had a falling out with Spike after they were both going after the same woman, Julia. Mm-hmm. So Spike is presumed dead 3 years before the show and decides to ditch that life and move on. Julia doesn't meet him when he tries to encourage her to run away with him. So
she finds her own way out.
Yeah.
And she starts running from the Syndicate as well.
So it all comes to a head when Vicious attempts a coup on the Syndicate to gain power, and they all get targeted for just being associated with him, which leads them all to kind of converge at the climax of the story, which we won't spoil because it's
very good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you've gotten this far and haven't watched Cowboy Bebop, pause this and go watch Cowboy Bebop. We'll wait. Are you back?
Was it great? It was great, right?
Yeah. You're listening to the soundtrack right now. I can tell. It's in your head. All right. It's just a really good story. And they did a really good job with that episodic storytelling because they can basically slot in a lot of those stories anywhere and can add in content in between episodes to add filler or to tell new stories, which they did with the movie Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Yep.
Which is just a elongated episode.
Yep.
And it's very well done, which is also something to definitely go and check out.
Yep. It made me wince a couple times just because I'm, again, a wiener baby, especially when it comes to gore. And there's a couple parts in there where, like, Vincent is very handsy, but not in the good way.
He is a bad dude.
He is.
But actually, that goes into one of the other things. Throughout the entire show, there's very rarely characters that are completely horrible people. Like Vincent from the movie has his own trauma and has dealt with it in a very bad way. But you see how he was like before that, and you can see how he became that person. There's other people where you see like they were wrong person at the wrong time, and that's how life kind of dealt their hand for him. There's even one of the most psychopathic killers.
Oh, I was wondering when we were going to talk about him.
Mad Perot.
Yeah.
Has his backstory, and his eventual end is so sad because you realize that he didn't choose this, and what happens to him is just sad.
Yep.
So every once in a while, of course, you have those people where it's like, I really hope that they get shot in the face. But more often than not, they have stories and characters that you find some sort of sympathy for.
Yep.
Which I really like. The only one that you don't really ever get any sympathy for is Vicious in that. He's just a cold, calculating murder machine.
Yeah, you don't get any bit of him that is of any redeeming quality at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, I agree.
And throughout all this, you have just fantastic animation. This show being made in the late 90s is phenomenal and still beats out some modern animation.
The soundtrack goes above and beyond.
And there's a reason why Yoko Kanno has done the soundtracks to some amazing shows. And Watanabe has continued to do a lot of his similar style of directing for other shows such as Samurai Champloo and Space Dandy.
Yes.
Which are, I know with Champloo, he did a similar aesthetic of trying to get the music in animation to have an interplay where he had the soundtrack front and center. With this one, it's all about jazz and blues.
Yep.
And with Champloo, it's about hip hop and rap.
Oh.
But it's set in the Edo era of Japan. So as they're starting to phase out the samurai and that there's more modernization.
Okay.
And you have like the last two Ronin. It's a very good show that I would like to go back and rewatch. But the one thing that this show has taught me is that muscle I developed as a teenager to watch and binge anime has dissipated. It got burnt out on Shonen Jump series, and now I can't do it.
See, I can. I still can. I burned through Sailor Moon Crystal as fast as I could.
See, and I watched Hunter x Hunter, but that was at 2 times speed, and those like half episode long recaps, it kills me. I want like a Kai reboot of all those shows I want to watch to just make sure that those segments are cut out, and I don't have to listen to like someone else in Naruto 40 episodes in explaining how ninjutsus work. We got it. We've got this far in. We don't need a rehash. I think that nowadays shows are made with that intention of being binged.
Yeah.
But there's still those little holdouts that just make it so difficult.
And I 100% get that. And that's why I kind of appreciate at least Netflix has that skip recap button.
Yes. Now, the unfortunate thing was, while watching the series on Netflix, you've watched one episode to the next because the intro starts off every episode. There's no like cold open. It would skip Tank on the animation every single time.
It was sad.
Thankfully, with the Netflix series, there is a cold open and then it goes to Tank. But still, I wish that there was an option to turn that off, or at least on certain shows, because I never get tired of that song or that soundtrack. I've listened to it for decades now. That's almost 2 decades of listening to this show.
See, and I've only got less than 1, maybe 6 years of Cowboy Bebop love under my belt. That's because you introduced me to it. So
yeah. Now, the one thing I wish that we could get is
merch.
Yes, merch. And there was 2 games released, one for PS1, which I've seen videos of, and PS2, which I think I tried a ROM hack of.
Oh.
I'm sorry, authorities. I promise not to do it again. I'm totally going to do it again. But it didn't capture what I wanted from the show. Like, it's cool. You can go around, you can beat people up. You get to fly the swordfish, which is Spike's ship.
Up.
And that's cool. But I kind of just want, like, if there is a game that exists out there where you're hopping between planets and colonies, capturing bounties, that would be like just capturing that vibe of it. That's what I want. Not maybe not with that cast, but like set in that world. There's so much more of that world that I want to explore that feels lived in.
Yeah.
The designs are so diverse. There's so many different people in there. Everyone seems like they have their own story going on, even if they're a side character.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the cast is meeting them at one moment and that there's other stuff that they're going to do after this. It doesn't feel like they're just set pieces to be seen. I
know. And I think personally, I think one of the perfect examples of that is the pet store lady where they get Ein. Accidentally, they get Ein there. But that pet store lady has this light turquoise hair and a turtle shell on her head. And she's eccentric with her jewelry. And it's just like, I would like to know what you do in your free time, because you obviously have interests that are likely very unique. How did you come into this pet shop? What is your obviously you super love animals. What's your backstory? And it was just like, I need to know more about the turtle shell hat lady. Like, I need to know.
And then there's those 3 old men that keep on reappearing in different episodes.
Oh my
just
gosh.
as almost like throwaway comedic characters. But they have this ongoing history of them talking about times before. And it's just really neat. And I'd like to know, like, those would be the type of people that's like, okay, I'm going to sit down at a table and just tell me stories, please. That's all I want.
10 fake points if you can drop in the comments on whatever bit of social media you're hearing this on, or on Instagram if you want to go see us there. If you can tell us what their names are. 10 fake points. Continue.
So that's going to lead us into the Netflix series, which just came out.
Yes.
So we had sort of mixed feelings on this.
Yeah.
Like, Yoko Kanno's back for the soundtrack, which is phenomenal. Watanabe acted as a consultant.
Yep.
For the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the series was helmed by Alex Garcia Lopez and Michael Cattleman, who directed 5 episodes each.
Okay.
And there was some hits, there was some misses. I found that when it came to anime adaptations, it was almost a good idea to kind of treat it as like the Marvel What If series, of not necessarily them trying to do one-to-one, because when it comes to trying to do a one-to-one adaptation, we've seen Death Note on Netflix, and we've seen the Full Metal Alchemist movie where they just tried to cram as many of the plot lines in that short period of time. And even though they have those moments that look like the anime and try to do callbacks to it, it never goes well. There's just, the pacing's always off. It's just weird. So we went into this very open-minded. I didn't expect that it was going to be, like, I knew the musical was going to be good, but I wasn't too sure how the action was going to be or how the story was going to be.
See, and I thought it was at least going to be good because I love John Cho. John Cho is so great in general. I just very much enjoyed him. And I had such curiosity about who they were going to pick to portray certain people. I was really excited to see certain characters, and there was a lot of them that weren't delivered on. Now, I don't know if they're going to do a season 2.
They already, I think they've gone renewed for season 2.
Okay, good, because there's a lot missing that I need. Like, so far, Cowboy Andy has not been in that. And
he's referenced once, but he was one of our favorite characters to come out of the Teddy Bomber episode.
Favorite characters to hate, I would like to clarify. Yes. I can't stand Andy. I hate his stupid face and his dumb horse. Anyway, but I wanted to see, because that character is so stupidly annoying. I need to be able to actively hate a human being for that character. And it was really tough going through it, hearing only references to Ed.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we should talk about what has changed with it.
Yeah.
So a big change from it is Spike was known as Fearless when he was with the Syndicate. It is weird.
It does make it weird.
But in fairness, the main antagonist's name was Vicious. So he was pretty weird.
Yeah.
So, to begin with, he's portrayed to be a little bit older. Julia, his love interest, and Vicious get a lot more characterization in it.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's kind of a mixed bag, because...
And that's just my opinion. I did not like their development. I did not like those portions of it, but that's just me. Again, just me.
Yeah, in fairness, like, Julia was missing throughout the anime, so when her character finally appears, and at the climax of the story, it doesn't have any impact whatsoever. Where here, she's built up quite a bit more.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can understand why they went that angle.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to. Vicious actually gets more personality rather than being cold and calculating, but that's the same thing as finding out that Darth Vader is Anakin and was complaining about sand. It makes it really hard to be scared about a guy once you hear him get emotional about sand.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, okay, you're a man and you have severe daddy issues, and that's why you're shooting people in the face.
Yeah,
okay.
He had daddy issues, and he decided to make it the solar system's problem.
Exactly.
Jet now was accused of being a dirty cop, went to prison after he lost his arm, and is a father to a little girl who he is constantly trying to be in her life while also being a bounty hunter. And I found that was a nice change because he was already the ship's dad. Like he did try and instill that wisdom, and he did try to break down like fights and resolve things the same way that you would as a parent.
Yeah, I got, and I said this while we were watching it, I got really big Final Fantasy VII Barrett vibes from him. Like, needed to look after this little girl, mechanical arm, fake arm, what have you, same kind of deep, raspy voice, the same FU attitude. Like, it was it was almost like watching a Final Fantasy VII Cowboy Bebop hybrid with that change. It just, I had a hard time seeing Jet as Jet. I was like, oh, it's Barrett. It's Barrett.
That's fair. He only has one real standalone story, where I think he only had like 3 in the main series.
I can only recall 2.
Okay. And the next big change happened to Faye. Faye in the anime was always coming in and out of the lives of the crew of the Bebop. She never wanted to stay in one place.
Yep.
She definitely had some commitment issues spawning from what had happened to her when she woke up from her cryo sleep. And in this, she runs into the crew and is there for the long haul. She never abandons them. She never really, like, once she's settled with them, which is with the Sea Rat eco-terrorist episode, she stays with them and doesn't really consider leaving, the same way that she would kind of up and leave in the middle of a tense moment in the anime.
Yeah, to go do her own thing, because they're like, well, we don't have the same goal right now, so I'm just going to go do what I'm going to do, and I'll see you guys later.
Which, don't get me wrong, I do like the fact that they do give her a little bit more emotional openness about some things.
Yes.
And they did a really interesting change where when she woke up, beforehand she was, this is, again, a spoiler for the anime, so you've already gone back and watched it. Go back and watch it again. We'll wait. So you see what I mean. So in there, she is saddled with a bunch of debt by someone who she thought cared for her when she first woke up, and is presumed dead and ends up being conned by this person. In the Netflix show, that has been changed from a man who was just showing her compassion to a woman who actually pretended to be her mother and steal from her.
What I really liked about this, though, is that they were able to keep the same name, where the man in the anime, his name was Whitney Haggis Matsumoto. And they just kind of reintroduce, like, oh, Whitney Haggis Matsumoto. And a woman picks up the phone, and you're like, oh, what's going on? And then you find out later on, like, you pretended to be my mother, I hate you so much. And I was like, oh, this is more emotionally damaging. Okay, please continue.
So they had some really cool elements with it. I feel like a lot of her character, at least from, the source material, gets left behind, because beforehand she was never not conning people, because that's how she had to deal with things.
Yeah.
And in this, her character wasn't as overly sexualized as it was in the anime, but in a lot of scenes she didn't do nearly as much as her anime counterpart.
No, like, she didn't steal anything from the crew, which happened regularly in the anime. She wasn't trying to steal bounties from under them. She wasn't dishonest. She just either didn't talk or was being snarky and working with them anyway. So yeah, there was a little bit different there. But she was sassier in the live action.
Oh yeah. I do like a lot of the scenes between the crew. Some of them felt a little stilted, a little forced.
Yeah.
All the stuff between Jet and Spike, that's, I guess, like the main relationship that they focused on, was really well done. They did do some changes to the stories that I wasn't too keen on. And I guess going forward, light spoilers. They changed or tried to mash up the AI carving into the planet story arc with an AI that develops sentience and starts doing its own thing, but generally in a peaceful way. And then the Dr. Londes cult, and they mashed those two together. And in doing so, they really lost a lot of like what made that cult storyline really good.
Yeah.
And then they lost a lot of what made the AI storyline really good. Because the AI storyline was, it's an AI that got lonely and started to draw the, I cannot remember the name of it's in South America. It's the large drawings of animals and people that were done
Yeah.
that can be seen from space. Those ones. And I tried recreating those because after these story events of Cowboy Bebop, Earth is just mostly abandoned
After
and damaged.
a spaceport blew up, yeah.
So Ed ends up talking to it and being able to download it and just kind of steal it away. And it's this really nice moment. It's this nice humanizing moment where the crew is actually doing something selfless that they know they won't get paid for. And with Londa's in the anime, it's all about trying to find out who's behind this cult, and you eventually find out the person who's behind it is almost like inadvertently doing these horrible things because they've just dissociated because they're in a coma and attached to a VR headset. And again, it's sad. You feel sad for this person and don't really see them as a villain, but just more of a victim of the circumstance.
Yeah.
And the way that they mashed those two together really lost what made those two things good. And then with Mad Perot, they ended up tying that story into the fact that Vicious is trying to hunt down Spike. So now Perot is specifically looking for Spike, where beforehand he was just a chaotic force that Spike happened to run into.
Accidentally, yeah.
And then they tie Ein into having part of his brain in Ein's body. So they're tied together, and that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, the episode still ends on the same way, but you don't feel like you don't have the same emotional sting as it did in the anime.
Yeah. Like, I feel with the anime, not only were you terrified of him, because he was absolutely psychotic, and basically you were told right off the pin, like, anybody who sees Mad Pierrot's face does not survive. And if you do, he's hunting you down and you will be dead eventually. And he's a terrifying, terrifying design. Like, just, he's horrifying. He has this cackling laugh that's just terrible. But you get this backstory of he was an involuntary experiment and he had all these really awful things done to him and he was kept alone and nobody cared about him. And in the end, when he finally gets defeated and he's just sitting there crying for his mom, you feel so terrible because it all came to this head where this terrifying creature is just lashing out because of all the crap done to him. But the thing with Mad Pierrot is, in the live action, it just doesn't carry that weight.
No.
It's very different.
Yeah. And I guess it's the fact that they tried to have like a story thread throughout all the episodes, that they're like chronologically you went from one to the other to the other. There was always like the A plot and a B plot going on.
I think that damaged it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that was to its detriment, along with the ending to the series.
Yeah, they definitely go for a weird twist at the end of the season that I'm curious to see how it pays off in season 2. We'll see how they correct course, because I'm guessing they're getting a lot of feedback. If I've seen the subreddit and Twitter as of late, they have a lot of feedback to work within.
Okay. Those bits might be a bit of a slog. We're not going to say anything just to keep at least some stuff. But yeah, I think that part is going to be a bit of a slog.
Yeah. And the other thing that, while they changed how some characters were portrayed, one character that was portrayed very differently, and I feel like they might have lost a lot in how they did it in the show, was the character of Gren.
Yeah.
Where Gren is a character who is, I know in the show they call them intersex.
Yeah.
So Gren is a character who, due to a
hormonal experimentation done to him by the army,
they are intersex.
Yeah.
And they are a jazz musician on, I think it's Venus or one of the moons around there, that Faye runs into, who has a bone with Vicious, because everybody does.
Yep.
And they are calm, they are cool, they are an awesome saxophonist. They are a very cool, nuanced character who is, due to the experimentation on them, they are also dying. And they are just looking for not a resolution to why they were experimented on because it was Vicious's fault. They just want to be able to ask why Vicious basically accused them of being a spy and ended up with this experimentation happening to him.
Yeah.
So they just want to get that face to face. And it's this really cool moment where they basically set up an elaborate drug deal to get that one singular face-to-face and have that like few seconds of actual like eye contact with them to eventually face them. And it's a big gamble for something that's very important to them.
Yep.
And in the Netflix show, the character is portrayed by someone who is non-binary, which is great for the character. And I was excited when they actually had someone who was non-binary to fit the role. Mm-hmm. And I was excited to see what they were going to do with it. And instead of using any of that storyline, which is quintessential Gren, and Gren who is too good for this world.
Yes.
We end up getting a character who is a bartender / stage manager. And aside from kind of just reinforcing some Julia and Vicious storylines, doesn't really do a lot in the whole first season and is not set up to do anything.
Yeah, it didn't have the same feel.
No, like, great to have the representation, but not
in the right way.
Yeah, like, you gave the proper representation and then took away all the things that made that character great.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a trade-off. You can have a non-binary character have a good story role, and I'm hoping that the writers will correct course in season 2 and actually utilize Gren to have more of a story going on for him, because they have a really good story. And with the way they set it up, they kind of negated all of the established stuff. So we'll have to see how they work that back in, because there's a lot of storylines that they didn't use, but they did borrow from a lot of those stories already and take elements from a lot of them. So I don't know how much they actually have left to use wholesale.
Yeah, well, they keep fusing, so they've been picking bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of bits and pieces that they have that they can shove into other stuff. It's all going to depend on how they make it all fit and how smoothly it flows and whether or not the story continues to be cohesive, which I think they may run into some problems.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see.
I'm definitely looking forward to season 2, especially if we're getting more music for season 2. Like, don't ever change Tank from being the opening theme song. If you do, I know where Netflix's office is. I will come there personally. But with the reception they got there, Netflix is currently working on a One Piece series that's going to be live action.
Okay.
And that is another show that, for me and another friend, it holds a very special place in our hearts, because that was like the one that we binged like over a period of like an extended weekend, like almost like 100 episodes. That was a bonding moment for us.
No, of course,
and
I can imagine.
They have the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender series coming out.
So far, from what I've seen of the casting, it's going to be very good, but we've been hurt before.
Yeah, especially with the series creators not being attached to it anymore. But that's the thing. In this one, they were involved. I just wonder if it was one of those things like, tell us what you want from it, and we will pick and choose from there what we're going to do. Like, I don't know when they're consulted with the story how much they get a say in it. Now, I know with One Piece, it is still within one of Shonen Jump's top 5 mangas after almost 30 years.
Makes sense.
So they kind of need to do it right.
Yep.
Because it's very important, or at least still very popular over there. Yeah. So we're like, I don't think, like, Cowboy Bebop is still a popular show, but I don't know if the fan bases even like stack up even close to that.
Well, One Piece has been running for much longer.
Yeah.
Much longer. And Cowboy Bebop was never a manga.
Actually, no, it is a manga. There was an in-between series, 2 in-between series. We have one of them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
But yeah, I think similar to the movie, it's like in between
episodes?
different episodes of like, here's a little story that's going on.
Okay.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I know that this is one where a common ADHD trait is to like listen to, like, you find that one song that gives you the dopamine and you're just like, I'm going to listen to this until the end of time, or until eventually I put it on randomly one day and I realize that it does nothing for me. It's like that post-song clarity of like, oh, I've been listening to this. I'm going to delete this forever. And with this one, Among Tank, which is a fantastic song, Piano Black is the other one that I've been subjecting the kids to. I've been listening to that one in the car nonstop. I once upon a time learned it on the piano.
Oh.
I cannot do that now. I can only do like the first half of Moonlight Sonata on muscle memory. That's it. But it's one that I just love that song. And watching the series again is like, it's been really nice to listen to.
Good.
Yeah, it gives me the good feels.
Good.
But now that we're done with Cowboy Bebop, I'm back in like that anime mood. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to watch next? And I know that 95% of any of the stuff I try to go into after this is going to be severe disappointment because it's not going to
give you that same dopamine.
Yeah, it's not going to mesh well. So I think just after this, it's going to be going into Samurai Champloo and maybe Space Dandy and just keeping with Watanabe and Yoko Ono until I can ease myself off of that.
Yoko Kano.
Sorry, Yoko Kano. Oh, wow. That muscle memory of how many times
I mean...
Also musician.
Yes. So, like, you're close.
Yeah. But I think I'm just going to ease myself along there and eventually end up at Carol and Tuesday, and I'll drag you along with that.
Oh, I want to watch Carol and Tuesday.
So, for our next episode...
We're doing Dune.
And we'll be talking about the 2021 version, but also our take on the 1984, the 2000s miniseries.
And also the David Lynch movie.
The 1984 one.
That's the 1984 movie.
And maybe Jodorowsky's?
We will make
a passing mention of the horrible train wreck, but also the brilliant talent behind the almost Dune movie.
Yes, we will figure out how to properly pronounce his name first, because I can't even correct you. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to recap, we'll do the book, because I powered through the book recently.
Yep.
So we'll do the book. We'll do David Lynch's movie. Forgive me. Jodorowsky's idea of Dune. The 2000... What year?
It was 2000, I think.
The year 2000 miniseries. Maybe a few mentions of the video games.
Oh, yes.
Because you are aware of them. And the most recent 2021 Dune movie.
Being the main feature of that.
Yes.
Because, oh man.
There's feelings there. There are so many feelings. Many feelings.
So next episode, way too much Stan.
Absolutely. Way too much Stan. And just before we end here, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Also, 20 more imaginary points if you can tell us what Ed's full chosen name is. And if you want 20 more points on top of that, what Ed's actual name is. Okay, you can end the episode now.
So remember, like what you like, no matter what the mean kids say.
Visitors, thank you for your attendance.
Big thank you to Ethel and the Androids for the use of their song Used to Know You for the intro and the outro. You can find the link to their SoundCloud in the show description, as well as all our links to our social media. And thanks for tuning in and listening to our podcast. If you like the show, be sure to review and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice.